Begin the current Daf in Mesechta Yevamos Daf Nun Beis. Begin on the bottom line of the Nun Beis, where the Gemara continues explaining the opening halacha of our Mishnah, of our Parak, Pekamim regarding Machlekes, Ramil and Rabbanan, regarding Maimer Chamaimer, and get Achar. This goes by today's Daf. Some of these we discuss in today's Daf are the requirement to actually give Maimer before Yibum if there is such an obligation. Certain immodest practices which are punishable with Makas Martis as they relate to the law of marriage. The rules of giving Maimer in general, how it works. And the Machlek is when giving Maimer after a Chalitza. So begin the current Daf. Again, the bottom line of the Nalma base. The Mishnah had said that Ketzah, how so? Meaning, it was explaining the Machlekes of Ramilin and Rabbanan. It said, Asa Maimer v'chulu, if you did Maimer, etc. So we continue to talk about the days of it out. Says the Gemara. The Gemara here is just really doing a technical reading of the Mishnah. We already explained this with Rashi a little bit when we read the Mishnah. The Gemara is asking a technical question. Hi gerach hagedu? In other words, like Rashi explains, is this really a case of a gerach haged? You told me in the beginning of the Mishnah, you started saying Machlekes Ramil holds that no gerach haged, and the Chum say no, yes gerach haged. And then the Mishnah explained, Ketzah, those are the words of Yevamos Daf that we started here in the Gemara. The Mishnah goes, and how so? Asa Maimer v'chulu. But the problem is, the case the Mishnah quotes is actually get that comes after Maimer. So how are you saying Ketzah? That's not the case that Ramil and Chama disagreeing about. So my view says, no, Chama, this is what the Mishnah was saying. Get achar get, or Maimer chamaimer, that's Kedamar. Meaning that the Mishnah is not explaining, that's like we actually quote a Brisa on the previous stuff. The Brisa explains. The Mishnah actually doesn't explain the case of Maimer Chamaimer Gerach again. Then the Mishnah continues. Yavam echad b'Yevama achas. When you have one Yavam and one Yevama, Ketzad hatarasan. What's the mitzvah of permitting them? That's where the Mishnah continues in a different halacha. Asa Maimer b'Yevimtiv and Asa get. If you did a Maimer in his Yevama, then you give her a get. Tzrichim and Chalitza, then you require Chalitza for the Maimer, etc. And then the Mishnah continues with halachas of one Yevama. So again, the Gemara is just making a clarification. When you're reading the Mishnah, it doesn't sound like it flows because it says Ketzad, as if it's explained the halacha of Maimer Chamaimer, and it's not saying Gerach Haged. You're right. The Mishnah is not really explaining that halacha. That's explaining the Brisa, and then the Mishnah just continues regarding Yav Mechad B'Yevama Achas. Now, it's in the Mishnah. Asa Maimer Bal, if someone did a Maimer and then did Bia, remember the Mishnah was going through different cases of all the four variables. So it's saying Maimer, and then you have afterwards either Bia or Get or Chalitza. And then we said if you do first, Get, and then you do afterwards Maimer, Bia, Chalitza. So one of the cases was if you do Maimer and then you do Bia afterwards, that's like the mitzvah. Says the Gemara, let's say that line of the Mishnah supports Rav Huna. Because Rav Huna, he said mitzvah, it's Yevama, the actual mitzvah by Yevama is Mikadosh v'achkach boil. First you're supposed to do Kedushin, first you're supposed to give Maimer, and then you're supposed to go ahead and do Bia and do the mitzvah of Yibum. That seems to be supported from a Mishnah that says you do Maimer and then you bol, how is it mitzvah? Says the Gemara, no, not necessarily. You could say Av Zek mitzvah, that this is also like the mitzvah. Says Pshita, obviously that's also like the mitzvah. Says no. So when you would have thought to say Kivin Amamar, since the Master said, we said this in Perek Dalarach and Nachaptes Mabez. When someone does a Maimer in his Yevama, actually Parchem and Zik is Yevama. What happens is, there's no more Zika bond of Yibum, because you already did a Kedushin. V'cholol of Zika's Eris in the Nesun. Now you have a bond of Eris in the Nesun. And actually, Emma would say, love Mitzvah, you're not doing Mitzvah Yibum anymore. But when you're doing Maimer, you did a Kedushin. Now you're connected through your Kedushin. You don't have anymore your connection of the Mitzvah Yibum on you. So actually, I would say you're not fulfilling the mitzvah when you subsequently do yibum. Come on, that's what I'm saying. That no, that's also k'mitzvasa, even if you first did a maimer before you did mitzvah bia. Now, Gufa, going back to explain this teaching of Amar Abuna, he says mitzvah yevama that he holds the mitzvah of yibum is mekadosh v'achkach bol. You're actually supposed to first do kedushin, you're supposed to do maimer, and then go ahead and do the mitzvah of yibum. Now, then bol v'asa maimer. If you did bia and you did maimer, kana you acquire her. Says the Gemara, involved also Maimer. If you did Bia and you did Maimer, Pshita, of course, how can you Bia? You acquired her with Bia and you did a Maimer. So what do you mean that he's saying that you can be kind? Eliezer says, well, no, say, what he was saying was, involved below Maimer kana. If you did Bia without Maimer, you are going to be kind. But like Tchila, actually, one is not supposed to just do the mitzvah of a Yibum. You're supposed to first do a Maimer and then go ahead and do Bia. Says Gemara, how can you say that you're kind of without Maimer, but Batanya in the Brisa Loika? as Rashi explains, the word loika usually indicates 40 lashes for biblical violation. So obviously we see that it's a biblical halacha that one would get if he does bia without maimer. So how can you say you're going to be kind? So the Gemara answers, no, this would say loika is not the 40 lashes minatayra, rather makas mardis midirabana. It's the rabbinic lashes of discipline, which, since a person acted in a kalas rosh in a very frivolous type of a way, really you're kinda. Because from biblical law, of course you're kinda if you just do yibum, because that's the actual mitzvah of the Torah. Rabbinically, we want you to do maimer first. By not doing, we're going to give you lashes, but of course you're going to be kinda. As the Gemara illustrates this, because the Rav actually gave lashes of rabbinic lashes, for 8 different types of related halachas. First of all, man mekadesh b'biyah. Whoever goes ahead, although we know that the Isha miskadeshes, b'sholos drachim, mekesem shtar biyah, one of the ways of getting engaged to a woman is actually having intimacy. But he would give malchus if someone goes and does kedushin with biyah because it's pretzis, it's an inappropriate, immoral type of a behavior. Uman mekadesh b'shukah. If someone gets engaged in the marketplace, even with money, because it's a disgraceful way. You get married, you have a butt and you have a thing, and you go in the middle of the let's get married in the street. He would give lashes for that. If someone get engaged without shidduchim, right? We know that there's a shidduch. What happens? People get engaged when we do a vart. It's a shidduch. It's not even like there's no halacha that happened over there unless you do a tanoi and whatever. So if someone gets engaged without a shidduch, it's also the same thing because a shidduch is matching up to people, and if you get engaged without that, it's also considered inappropriate. Which Rashi explains a lot of these things in Masechta's Kedushin. It means to say, if let's say someone sends a get to his wife, and he reaches the shliach and he tells him that the get that I gave you is batal. Now the problem is that maybe the people are not going to know that he was mavatla before it came to her hand, and maybe the shliach is still going to give it to the woman after he was mavatla, and she's going to get married with it. So whoever's mavatla get is creating a situation where it might create mamzeim. He would give lashes forever his mavatla get. And umad demasamaida gita, and whoever gives out a proclamation against the get, for example, let's say what's called a get mu'usa. A get mu'usa is that when the courts force the person to give a get, where if it was done by the Jewish court, that's committed for the bezdin, but he's saying, I was forced, and now he's making laws on her children from the next marriage that, it wasn't really a get, I was forced by the courts, and this, that, so that type of person would get lashes from Rav if he was Masam Maida on the get. And the man that Parker Shlicha de Rabbanan, whoever acted in a hefker way, in a audacious, chutzpahdig way to the agent of the court, of the rabbis, where they're summoning him to a court, and he gets up and he slaps the agent, so such a person he would give lashes to. And whoever would delay, if the rabbis put an excommunication on the person for 30 days, but he didn't come to court to petition against his chayrim, so he would get lashes too for the fact that he was he was indifferent to the shamta. And regarding a son-in-law that lives by his mother-in-law, where they might stumble, because generally the mother-in-law loves her son-in-law. As the Gemara says in Suffolk of Gimel and Aleph, that you should be careful with your wife from her first son-in-law. Which Tosha points out that we rely on the Nehardai, which we're going to quote shortly, that says that by all these things Rav did not give lashes to, only for someone who would get engaged with Bia, but living next to the mother-in-law, actually many people do that, and by rabbinic law, which this is Shal Seif Meguacha Ameko, which is like Nehardai. But Akapanim, one thing the Gemara asks, you tell me the door in only if someone who lives, meaning we see one of these things was that Rav gave lashes to if he's Mekadesh with Bia, which is what Yevamos is. And therefore that's why we said that ideally we want the person to first do Maimer and then do Bia. But now the Gemara, once we brought in this teaching of Rav of these 8 things, so the Gemara says the dar in, if only someone who lives by his mother-in-law, but the Chalaf Leif, he just passes by her house and he doesn't get lashes. But someone who just passed by the entryway of the household of his mother-in-law, but no, Rav Sheshes gave him lashes. Who made them have a doim mechamuse? That person was suspected with his mother-in-law from him, that there was something inappropriate going on, so therefore he got lashes. But yeah, just passing by is not a problem, but living there permanently would be a problem about creating an inappropriate situation. Now, however, like we quoted from Taisa, it says, it's not true, Rav did not give lashes by all these things. Only whoever gets engaged with bia without even a shidduch, he just has intimacy. But it doesn't say no, even if it's mekadosh with bia, even if he had the shidduch, they made the shidduch, the shots and put them together, and they make a shidduch. Even so, if he does the condition with bia, that's also, he would give a lash of so that's also an inappropriate way of acting, and therefore, even with shidduchim, he would give lashing. But again, not for all these other things, including living next to the mother-in-law. Now, continuing regarding just practical rules of Maimer, talking about what the Brisa, Kate said Maimer. How does Maimer work? So, Nosel Kesef, Shava Kesef. He gives her money, or something that's worth money, and he tells her, become engaged to me with this Maimer of Yibum. Now, although he's giving her something, it's not a full-fledged kedushin like biblical kedushin, because kedushin is not teifis by Eshesach, by your brother's wife. The Torah doesn't permit you to do this like a regular woman. Rather, it has to be like in the order of the mitzvah. The Torah writes it has to be with bia, but rabbinically, which is the halach of Maimer, that's how it works. Now, Bishtar, if he gets engaged to her with a document Ketzad, what does he write over there? So the Gemara says, Bishtar Ketzad? What, you're wondering how does a document work? But since you already told me the case of Kedushi Kesef, which you just give her money like all other women, so obviously the same would be, there's three ways that you Mekadosh a regular woman, but Kesef, Shtar, Abiyah. So you told me the case of Kesef. So Shtar is also like all other Shtar Edison, like all other types that you do a document, how you get engaged. So says the Gemara, that's Kedamar, like we said, Masechet Kedushin. He writes for her on a piece of paper, on a piece of earthenware. It's not worth a pruta, but you're not getting engaged from the shavius, from the value of the paper. It's just from the actual kin of the document. And you're right, that you're engaged to me. So what's the shayla? So Amabaye says that this Tana was not going on the shtar of the Maimer itself, which is the kedushin. Rather, hachikama. This is what the Bryce was saying. Shtar kesubas yavmin ketzah. The document of the ksuba of the Yevamot, how is that? And that's what the Bryce is saying. Possibly, he writes to her, Ana, me, the Yavam, Poloni by Poloni, this person, the son of this person. Kabelis is Polonis Yavinti Alai, I accepted this woman that's my Yevama on me. Lazim, Lafarnas Akro, to provide for her, sustain her appropriately. As long as her ksuba is on her first husband, the brother who passed away without any children, and not on the Yavam. What's the reason? So I think I'm already said in Achel, stop Lam Testament Aleph, because Isha Hiknu Leim Nishma, he didn't choose this woman. It was acquired to him from heaven, so therefore it's not his responsibility. But it says the Gemara, but if she does not have a ksuba from her first husband, then they do institute it from the second husband. The whole point of a ksuba is that it shouldn't be light in his eyes just to get rid of her, because it's a liability, financial cost, and we want that to be a deterrent. And therefore, if there is no ksuba from the first one, then the Yavam would have to write a ksuba. Now, continuing on this theme of our Mishnah, related to this idea of giving a get to a Yevama. But it is his money, because his brother's money is acquired by him. But it's just not on all his assets. So when one brother gives the Yevama a get, so we said in the Mishnah that him and the other brothers are prohibited to perform Yibum with any Yevamas midrabanan. So the Gemara asks a question, related to this halacha of the Mishnah regarding giving a get to Yevama. Nosan, if the Yavam gives a law to his Yevintai, a get, Va'aman, he says to her, so we said a get will do something rabbinically, but the question is, if he says to her, you're divorced from me, but you're not permitted to anyone else. Now, what's the halacha? Would this have the same halacha we said in the Mishnah, that it invalidates her on him and on his brothers with this get, that it should be considered what's called lo yivna. Once you started not building, we said in the Mishnah, the shuv lo yivna, could you give a get? So then that's you can't give anymore. What would the halacha be where he gave her a get from me, but you're not permitted to anyone else? What's the question? So the Gemara explains. On the one hand, get Yevama dirabanan. The get that works by Yevama is only rabbinic, like we said. By Yevama has to be either Yibam or Chalitz. Now, therefore, the question is, get mahani be'eshes, do we say only a get that would work by a married woman? So that's mahani be'yevama, that works by yevama. But get mahani be'eshes, but a get that does not work by a married woman, which this get would not work by a married woman to permit her to get married because it's saying she's forbidden to everyone else. So you're also mahani be'yevama. It would not be affected by the yevama. It wouldn't be a gerushin to make it lo yivne. A dilma, no, maybe aslachut begit. Ultimately, it's going to get confused with a valid get, and then he might come to do yibum after a get. And therefore, we say even here where it's not even a real get because it's not permitting her to get married to anyone else, would still make it that you cannot go ahead and do yibum because you gave this inferior type of a get. So Amalei said to him, Rabbi answered, he says, we're concerned that it's going to come confused with a regular get. And therefore, even if he gave this subpar get of that you're divorced from me but not permitted to anyone else, that you wouldn't be able to do yibum anymore. Because it's going to get confused with the regular get, which we don't want you to do yibum after get. So Rabbi Chana asks, he says, if that's the case, what happens if he just gives her a piece of paper? What, that's going to go ahead and invalidate her? Because he's handing her a paper and with an official document. What does that mean? So Malay Abai said to him, no, that hasam over there by a regular piece of paper, if a man gives a woman a blank piece of paper, that would not invalidate her for kahuna as a gerusha. But hach over here, although it's not real get, if a kohen gives such a get to his wife that says that you divorced from me but you're not permitted to anyone else, she's actually forbidden to him as a gerusha, not really gerusha. But that's why our question is over here. Would we say at least rabbinically it's effective to invalidate it from yibum when he says to the yevama that you're divorced from me but you're not permitted to anyone else? Where do we find this idea? The time I learned the brisa. The pasuk says in Yikra that a kohen, the isha grusha mi isha lo yikachu, a woman that's divorced from her husband, they should not take. What do you mean divorced from her husband? Of course she's divorced from her husband. You don't get divorced from someone else. So what it means to say is that that even if she's only divorced from her husband, even if it's not permitting her to anyone else, still lo yikachu. The kohen is not allowed to take such a woman. That's what's called in halacha the scent of a get, which is not a real get, but it has the scent, the smell of a get, because it's saying that you're divorced from me. And for that, a kohen is forbidden to such a woman. So that was our question, not stop a piece of paper. This actually has some halachic significance. And therefore the question was, would we say that would be confused with a get? And that Rabbi was saying it would be, but a piece of paper, don't ask me, that wouldn't have any halachic standing whatsoever. The Gemara continues and says that another question. Since they said, if someone says to a scribe, custom get ladder sasi, write a get for, he was engaged, and meaning halachically engaged, not like the way we do in our time. He says, I have this woman I'm engaged to. I want you to do me a favor, write a get for the woman I'm engaged to, that that when I will get married, I'm going to use this get, these prenups, that's how far they went, right? Then I'm going to go ahead and divorce her. So he already had his get prepared when he was engaged. So it says on Muhammad, he says, how is a get? That's considered as a get. And if he gives it to her after they got married, she's going to be divorced. What's the reason for this halacha? It's very important, says the Gemara. Because when it was written, he has the ability right now to divorce her with this. As Tais explains, you cannot make a shlichus for something that you don't have the hechatimtza right now. So this that he's making the dayan right to get, it only has halachic significance if you could use it right now. But if you can't, then you can't make as the Gemara is going to say in a moment, a shliach to do something that you couldn't do right now. But since you could divorce her because you're engaged to her, so to say that you're going to do it after the marriage is also going to work.
But it sounds like he had conviction when he had that in mind when he started.
Right, and the Gemara says in general, right, that shouldn't be done, that even stay with a woman if you know that you're going to divorce her, yeah. But maybe he was just worried or concerned, maybe he wasn't intending deliberately to do it, just wants to be prepared. Some people always want to go through all the... Now, Rashi says, what's a get yashin? And Tais also discusses what's called an old get, which if you wrote a get at a certain time, and then you only divorce at a later point in time, when you've been together, it actually invalidates the get. So how could it be that? As the Gemara says, a get in Tessim base, but still says apostle, which a get yashin is if he was secluded with her after the writing. That Rashi answers that the Gemara says within Paragazar that, but if you used it to divorce, you could get married initially. So although you shouldn't use it to get divorced, but that's a Rashi to discuss it differently. But Al Kapan, that's going to work by an Arusa. Now, it's continued to bathe, but Al Isha Ba'alma, but if let's say a regular woman, meaning that he's not engaged to, and he subsequently gets married to, and he divorces her with it, that ain't get. That wouldn't be a get that he wrote before they even met. Nishin biyadeh, because when it was written, he didn't have the ability to garsha. She wasn't fit for gerushin to make a get at that point. But by Rav Muhammad, this all leads back to our sugya. Rav Muhammad, he wanted to know what's the halacha if he wrote for his Yevama before he married her, and when he subsequently married her, he gave her this get. Could he go ahead, she'd be divorced with this get? What's the question? The Gemara explains. On the one hand, even like Gida Basin, she's connected to him because we know it's Zika. It takes to discuss whether it's a different interpretation, Mayim or Zika, but the way it sounds like is that with the Zika she's connected to him. So it's like she's engaged to him. And therefore, it is beyond Lagarsha. Maybe no, since he didn't do Maimer, then there's nothing here that you're really connected to, and there's no Kiddushin, so he's not engaged, so maybe not. So take a listen, it's not clear if the Zika would be enough of a connection to say that it's Biyad Lagarsha at this point in time, to use it after he goes ahead and gets married to her. Now, related discussion, Bayir Hanani says, custom get Lazikasa Layla Mamara. Let's say someone wrote a get for his Zika and not for the Maimer. So let's say he wrote a Maimer and he gives her a get, but he only gives it for the Zika, not for the Maimer. Or, Lamamarai, below the Zikasa. He did it, the get for the Maimer, meaning he did a Maimer first, and he's not giving it for the Zika. Now, what's halacha which should become invalidated because of that get? So the Gemara explains the question. What's the question? Maimer, do we say that, how does Maimer work? Ilovei Zika Korami? When he does a Maimer, does it connect with the Zika? Does it add on? What's Zika? Zika is a connection that we have, that is a mitzvah for us to have this, do something with this relationship. And Maimer is furthering that relationship, and therefore you can't give a get for one without the other, because it's a compound. And since he wrote in the get that he only did it for one of them, essentially, says the Gemara, like you're divorcing half a woman, because it can't be separated. And if you divorce half a woman, you haven't done anything, and actually she's permitted to him. If you wrote the get, should it only be for the Maimer or the Zika when you did a Maimer? Because they're inseparable. Maimer is just furthering the Zika. And you're writing his only word for one, you're essentially doing it for half the woman. And if that's not doing anything. Maybe no. Maybe each one is independent. And therefore a get for one of them would be effective. So as Rashi explains, when you write that the get should be for the Zika, not for the Maimer, what's going to happen is that she's forbidden on him and on the brothers because you're removing the Zika. And now there's La Yivna. And if he writes it for the Maimer and not for the Zika, where Rashi says it, Tosa discusses possibly different, but that she's forbidden to him and she's permitted to the brothers because the Maimer that he did, he took away, and you remain with the Zika as it was originally. Which Tosa discusses really technically according to one Madama that she's even permitted to him because the Maimer that he gave was taken back. Upon him, that's the question. Would we say that each are independent and it can work halfway? Or would we say that no, they're together and therefore it can't work halfway? Says, well, what's the question? Why don't you resolve this question from Rava, which is brought in Arba Achen we had previously in the Lamabizim and Aleph, regarding when you have a Zikas, what's called Zikas Beis Yevamot. When one woman can actually have a Zika from two different dead husbands. How so? When there's three brothers, these three were married to three unrelated women. One of them dies, and the second one does a Maimer and he dies. So now she has like a Zika still from the first one, and now she has Zika from the second one. So he said, you have to do Chalitza. The Amar Rabbi that he says, in that situation, Rabbi said, the halacha is Chalitza b'Nisabnis because of that situation. But Rabbi says, if Nosim get l'mamor, if let's say you give a get, that second guy who did the Maimer, if he gave a get for the Maimer, and not for the Zika, and then he dies, that Huchut Sarasa, that the co-wife, meaning his first wife, the second brother's first wife, which is the co-wife, is permitted to the second brother. Why? Meaning, if he wouldn't have given the get, she would be forbidden to the third brother because she's a tzara of the woman who has zika shnei yevama. But now that he gave a get to that one from the first brother, so obviously Rashi explains what the Gemara is saying in Rava is that hay l'chudeikoi, each one is independent. Why? For the fact that we say that the get is effective to permit the co-wife to the second brother, obviously all it's doing is removing the minor. And the same thing would be, really says Rashi, that actually the woman herself, that second woman, the one from the first brother, would also be permitted to the brother. It's just that it would get confused with a full-fledged woman who has a get, that would, if it was done to the zika, let's say before minor, or to zika and minor. That's how the Gemara explains the arba achin. That's why she herself is forbidden, but technically, even she herself should be permitted, and we do say that the tzara is permitted. How do we say it's permitted? Obviously, because what we're doing is that the get is effective on some level to go ahead and work halfway. So you see that it's luchudekoi. Says the Gemara, okay, Rav Pshitali, right? According to Rav, would be obvious based on his halacha of nasi get lamamora. If you can give the get to the mimer, that will permit the tzara. It's going to work only for the mimer and not for the zika. Or the chanani, but you can ask the question. What's the halacha? So it's going to take a less time. Meaning, you're right. Rava would be obvious, but for Rambam Chama, he doesn't necessarily hold to this halacha of Rava, and based on that, you would have a question: would it work for only part, or do you say that they're inseparable? And that if you did it for the mimer, it wouldn't do anything, and therefore you wouldn't have the halacha of Rava, because you can't do halfway. You can't just do for the mimer. It would have to be totally. And if you didn't do it, then actually it's still Eishes Beis Mason, and it would be forbidden. That question could still be according to Rambam Chama. Now, it said in the Mishnah, chalatz. Remember, if we said we went through all the four elements, each one of them with all the other three. So we spoke about asa mimer, and then you did get. Chalitza, Bia. So one of the cases in the Mishnah was we did Chalitza and then the Asa Mimer.
Is the mimer still in place?
With what?
With what you just said before, that you said there's a possibility that they can use the mimer in order to get.
If you say that Mimer and Zika are independent,
yes.
So then you would be able to just remove the Mimer, and then you have the Zika remaining, and then you could do whatever you had done before Mimer was done. So in that case, by Rava would be that she's not Eishes Beis Mason. It's just it would bring it back to its original state where she has only the Zika from the first one, because the second one didn't do anything with her. He removed whatever the mimer had done. Now in this case of Chalitza, if you do Chalitza and then you do mimer, or if you do Chalitza and then you give a get, Chalitza and then you do Bia. So that was what the Mishnah said, that Einacha Chalitza Klum. So there's nothing after Chalitza at all. That's the final word. Now, I'm going to read the Rav. It qualifies, and we had mentioned this when we said the Rashi and the Mishnah, that a lot of our Mishnah was Zu. This halacha that we said, that if you do Chalitza and then you do Mimer, which was saying that in Achach Chalitza Klum, that's it, the Mimer is not going to take effect at all. Oh, that's the Rabbi Kiva. That's not according to everyone. That's the Amar he holds in Kedushin Teis and Kedushin, which is what Mimer is, cannot take effect, B'chiv Lavin, by negative prohibition, which is, when you do Chalitza, what happens is, the woman becomes Shuvla Yivna. That's a negative prohibition. Chacham would say, yes, they wouldn't agree with the halacha of our Mishnah. They will hold Kedushin is Tevis B'chiv Lavin. So of course, if someone gave a mimer after the Chalitza, of course it would take effect. Because only Chiv Lavin, only negative prohibition. Says Imam Mimah, says could you really say the halacha of Mishnah like a Kiva? But for Ketani Reisha, in the beginning of our Mishnah, in the previous, meaning before Chalitza, when we were speaking about Nas and Get, so we went through Get and we said, oh, you do Get and then you Mimer, you do Get and then Chalitza, you do Get and then you do the Yevamos. So one of the cases was, he said, Nas and Get v'asa Mimer. Let's say he gave a Get and then he gave a Mimer. So he said, Tzricha Get. So you need to have a Get for the Mimer, for Chalitza, for the Zika, because you never fully removed the Zika, because Get doesn't fully reject the Zika. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva, if Allah is like Rabbi Kiva, but Kiva in the Yavla Get, once you gave her a Get, Nima Hani B'Mimer, according to Rabbi Kiva, would Mimer be effective after Get? By the time when the Bryce Rabbi Kiva says, we're discussing, he says, how do we know? If someone gives a get to his Yevama, she becomes forbidden to him forever. Christian Emmer, it says in the Pasuk, in the Vadim, it says, Now this pasuk actually is talking about something else. This pasuk is talking about that her husband, who sends her away, cannot take her back, as the pasuk there continues, Lashav Lakachta Lias Laisha, to take her back as a wife, after that she become defiled, meaning if she was already intimate with another man, she got married to someone else, that's the Isra Machzik Rishasa. You can't take back the ex-wife. Now, but the Rebbe Kiva is medayik from the word Asher Shilcha, that means Achar Shiluach. In other words, from the fact that Asher Shilcha, which is seemingly superfluous, is unnecessary that he sent her away, that's coming to say that there is a situation when you have someone who sends that's not allowed to take back after sending away, even if she had not gotten married to someone else. Who's that? That's the Yevamos. That when he sends her away, when he gives her a get, even if she didn't marry someone else, you're not allowed to take her back. Now, since that's a negative prohibition of lo yuchol, as the pasuk says, so how can you say that a mimer is going to be effective after the get? Lishi tasev, Rabbi Kiva holds that kiddush not to be 11. So if you tell me the Mishnah is Rabbi Kiva, how can you say get v'achkach mimer if that's a negative prohibition of lo yuchol? So Rashi says no. Get Yevamos Daf. The get by Yevamos is rabbinic. Of course, you could have mimer afterwards to be taking effect. But I would bring a pasuk. It says Asher Shulchan. I'm including over there the halacha of Yevimto that was sent away with a get that it says lo yuchol. Asmach ba'alma. That's just an illusion. That's just supporting our rabbinic law, but it's not a biblical negative prohibition. And therefore, Rabbi Kiva would agree that mimer would take effect in this woman, this Yevamah that already gave a get to. That's why it's Tanya Al-Chazil in the Brisa like Rabbi Yehuda. That because Rebbe says, these things are not said that we said that there's nothing going to be after Chalitza. And then Rabbi Yehuda who said that our Mishnah is only like Rabbi Kiva, because Rebbe says this halacha of our Mishnah in Chalitza Klum is all element of Rabbi Kiva, don't like Rabbi Kiva. He made a Chalitza, a woman that did Chalitza, do like an erva, meaning that we know Kedusha not tavis in the erva. It's only like Rabbi Kiva that a Chalitza that's a Chiv Alav is like an erva. But Chacham say yes, Chalitza Klum. That's like Rabbi Yehuda said, but after Chalitza there would be something. But says Rabbi Vani Omer, which this continues into another theme. He says, I say, Emasai. When do we say that there's going to be after Chalitza Tefis Kedushin? Meaning in according to Chacham is Shika, which Kedushin is Tevis B'chiv Lavan, but Rabbi says there's a limitation. That's only Bizmacha Kitra L'Shum Isha. That's only if he was getting engaged to her for the purposes of engagement, meaning like a generic kedushin, and not specifically with the mimer of yibum, because yes, kedushin is tevis chil alav. Aber kitchel shum yevamos. But if let's say he was getting engaged to her with the concept of yibum, that's not kedushin, because there's no element of yibum over here because it's already lo yivna, and therefore that would be for a different reason problematic, because that would be kedushay tais. That's erroneous kedushin. He thinks he's doing yibum. Give a get. These are mine. No, then says Rebbe, even according to the Chacham, inach chalitza klum. There would not be after the chalitza anything. Not because kedusha is not tevis chilavin, but because you make a mistake. You can't do mimer. Mimer is only when there's a zik of yibum. There's no zik of yibum over here anymore. Once you already went ahead and you did chalitza. So those are the chiv 11. Kedusha could be tevis, but not mimer of yibum. And therefore, it depends what type of kedusha you're doing if it's going to take effect or not.
How did Chacham say that kedusha works doesn't she revert back to Eishes Achim after Chalitza?
No, so that's the thing. We say that we had this Machlokes Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg exactly how far it goes, but no, it's interesting. Actually, she does not go back to Eishes Achim. She only has the Isser Kibbutz Leibon Shum Yivni, because you have the heter of Yidden. But then the Torah says you're not going to take her, but you did Chalitza, then Shum Yivni. That's a negative prohibition. Only actually you don't have the Isser of Eishes Achim. You only have the Chiv Alavin of Kibbutz Leibon Shum Yivni. Now, related discussion says the Martani that we'll learn another brisa. If someone does chalitza to his yevama, the chazar kidsha, and again the same idea, and then he goes and does kedushin. So Rabbi Yomi says it depends. In kidsha l'shum ishas, if the kedushin was for the purposes of marriage, like a regular kedushin, yes, strichim again. So then you would require again because like the chacham hold that kedushin is tevis b'chiv lava. But the shum yevamis, but let's say you're doing it for the purpose of yibum. And again, says I was recording just before. You wouldn't need to get because there's no yibum over here because the zika was removed. Achamim, they disagreed. They said no. Beitzah kitchel shum ishus, whether it was done for ishus, beitzah kitchel shum yivamis, whether it's done for yibum. They hope tzrichim and again. They hope no, it's not considered a kedusha tois. It's considered that his kedusha can be teifus, and therefore you would need a get. Now, Rabbi Yosef says, "My time in the Rebbe." So, what's the reason of Rebbe that he holds to this halacha that if you did it for yibum, right? What's kedusha tar? It's not a toys. I wanted to get engaged to her, so I did a minor. So I thought it would work in like that. It doesn't work like that. It worked in that fine, but that's what I wanted. What's the reason Rebbe that he holds? No, if you did it for the purpose of yibum, it's not going to be a kedusha at all, even though kedusha tar is allowed. So the Gemara has 6 different approaches how to explain this teaching of Rebbe. So the first approach, Rabbi Yosef says, the reason of Rebbe is because asur ka'eder. They made it like a person who is hoeing. It's like a type of plowing. The nichse hager, in the property of a convert, where ukasav shalayim, the one who was plowing thought it was in his property line. Meaning, he had a neighbor, a ger, a nice guy. He converted to Judaism, and the ger died. Now, a ger oftentimes doesn't have any yarshin because all the family that he comes from he's not considered related to. Now, the halacha is whoever takes possession of his properties acquires it. Now, this guy was hoeing in the ger's property, but he didn't realize they're out in the Galilee, there's no one makes any lines over there, whatever. He thought he was hoeing in his own property. And therefore, he didn't have any intention to take possession of the ger who passed away's property. So there, the halacha is Duloikani. He doesn't acquire because he was not intending to do a Maisa Chazaka of Kinyan in the ger's property. Yes, he was plowing, he was owing, but that was not his intention. So he's not going to acquire. So says Rabbi says, same thing is over here. Where here the person thinks he's doing that kedushin of Yevamos is going to take effect. He's doing a mimer, so he's not intending to acquire. He's only intending to come from this the handover from his brother through Yibum. But that doesn't exist. So since you did not intend to do this act of chazaka, it's saying, he did not intend to do an act of kedushin. You just intended to take over what your brother has. You're not taking over anything. You're into chalitza. Therefore, that's what Rebbe holds is not going to be effective. But Abai has a difficulty with this. He says to Rabbi Yosef, "Me, tell me, can you compare them?" Hasam over there by the hoeing. Look at Mechav Mikne. He had no intention to acquire at all because he thought it was his own property. On some level, he is intending to acquire her as a wife. And Abaye continues to ask. He says, "Hali Damya." It's not comparable. The case of where it's discussed over here. The case that would be comparable would be if, let's say, he's hoeing in this ger's property. He thinks it's some other ger's, but he's intending to acquire. He just doesn't realize that it wasn't that ger who died; it was that other ger who died. And did Allah is the he would acquire because he's intending to acquire. So here he's intending to acquire right from the strength that he's getting from his brother, but he's only going to be acquiring from his own as a regular kedushin. But a license a kinyan, and he's intending to do a kinyan, and therefore you would acquire. So it's not a good interpretation, says about Rabbi Yosef, why Rebbe would hold that you're not going to be kind of you're doing the mitzvahs l'shem mitzvahs yad. So Ella Amavai Rabbi says a second interpretation. He says that Hachmaiski, what are you talking about over here? Is Kugain, the Amar laws where he tells her is Kachli B'Maim Yevamos. I want you to be engaged with me, yes, with a mimer of Yibum, with a mimer of Yibum. So Rebbe Sava, he holds like this, and this is related to the discussion we had previously on this Amar. Rebbe holds mimer that the Rabban instituted for all Yevamim, Ilovei Ziku Kodar. It takes effect on the previous Zika. So it is only when there's a pre-existing Zika, mimer comes along and it buttresses it and it augments it. Here you can't say that. Because Va'asi Chalitza, Afkas Zika. You already did Chalitza to this woman, and you already moved the Zika. So Rebbe holds, you can't do mimer. Mimer is only solidifying a Zika that was already here. If there's no Zika, there's no mimer. But Rabban Sami, they hold, no, Halachadeka. Each one is independent. The Zika doesn't help the mimer at all. So when he's doing a mimer here, it's like it originally was. Mekava in the beginning, if you would tell her being engaged with the mimer of Yibum. Mila Mahani, wouldn't it be effective? Of course we would acquire her. And even though the Zika is not helping, it doesn't make a difference because they're independent. So even now when there's no Zika, Lamaisa, she's the Yevamos Daf, you have a mimer, the mimer would work. Even though you already moved the Zika with the Chalitza. That's the second interpretation of Rebbe's teaching which Abai qualifies their machlekes based on the principle of halach dekoi, or is alavei zika? A third interpretation, Rav Amma, he says, Id amala b'mam Yevamos. He says, if he tells her, I want to get engaged with you with a maimer of Yibam, no one's going to disagree that's going to be effective. Because, yes, everyone agrees that halach dekoi, they're independent, and maimer works on its own, and even though there's no more zika anymore, it doesn't make a difference. So what is machlekes then? What we're talking about over here is going to Amala, where he tells her it's actually bezikas Yevamos. He actually tells her, I want you to be engaged with the zika of Yibam. Rabbi holds that the Gitin Davan and Gilam Alav Yazika. Meaning, therefore, in general, when Maimah works, is in such a wording, if you would say with Zika's Yevamos, is because the Zika. Now that you did the Chalitza of Kasla, you removed the Zika, so you can't say get engaged to me with, because there is such an element of Zika, because you hold Yez Zika. So generally, if you would say become engaged to me with the Zika's Yevamos, it would work because there is such a thing. Now that you did Chalitza, there's no more Zika, so it wouldn't work. That's where the whole thing would work. But Rabban suddenly hold no, ain't Zika. Anyways, there's no substance to Zika ever. And even so, Mikari in the beginning, become engaged with the Zika Yevamos. Milo Mahani, wouldn't it be effective? Of course, it would be a mimer. So Ashanam Mahani, now also it's going to be effective. Again, not because anyways, there's nothing to Zika anyway. And if it would work then, it's going to work now also. That's the third interpretation. A fourth interpretation, Rav Shravya Amar, he says that b'chalitzik sheira, when it's by a valid chalitza, meaning if you did a regular chalitza, which we're talking about, you did chalitza and then you're doing afterwards mine. So idamala, if he told her, eskachli b'zikas Yevaman, become engaged to me with the zika of Yevaman, so you're right, kulam lepligi, no one disagreed, the loy mahal. That would not be effective because as Rashi explains, he holds yesh zika, and of course, chalitza would come along and remove it. So if you did a regular chalitza, of course now to go ahead and do a condition with zikas Yevaman, which already removed the zika, would not be effective. So what's the machlekes? The machlekes is regarding what's called an inferior chalitza, where he did the chalitza after a get, and then after that chalitza, after the get, then he went ahead and he did a condition with zikas Yevaman. So the machlekes is Marsa the Rebbe holds chalitza psula b'teres. Yeah, inferior chalitza still it exempts, and it's a done deal. And now that you're going to try to do with zikas Yevaman, nothing's going to take effect. But Marsa the Rabbana holds chalitza psula eina b'teres. That an inferior chalitza doesn't totally exempt, meaning it doesn't fully remove it, and there's still some substance of the zika here afterwards, and therefore Maimah would take effect when you're saying the kedushin with the zikas Yevaman. A fifth approach of Hashem, he says, no, the Kuli Am, according to everyone in this machlekas, they hold chalitza psula eina b'teres. Inferior chalitza does not fully remove. So v'hacha over here, when we're talking about a chalitza kashera, because you're right, it was chalitza psula, everyone agreed that the mind would take effect after the chalitza. So what's the machlekes of Rebbe and Rabbanan? Here we're talking about a regular chalitza. But b'yesh shnai b'chalitza, the machlekes is regarding, is there a halacha of stipulations in a chalitza? Shtais discusses regarding the parameters of this, but because there is such a halacha of muta, of being misled, that does work. But where he gave her the chalitza with the condition that she's going to give him 200. So he says, yeah, you don't want to be stuck with me a whole life and not be able to get married? Give me $200 and I'll give you the chalitza. So regarding that Tanai, there's machlekes. Marsab, the Rabbanan held, yesh t'nai b'chalitza. There is a halacha of stipulations by chalitza, and as long as it was not fulfilled, that does not remove the zika. And when he tells her, become engaged to me through this money of the zikas Yevam, it's going to be kind of because it was never fully done yet, even though chalitza was done, because there's still stipulations that weren't fulfilled. So it's not done deal yet. So he could still go ahead and do a kedushin after the chalitza. That's how the Rabban hold. But in Marsab, the Rebbe held that no, ain't t'nai b'chalitza. There's no a stipulation not affected by chalitza, and even if she does not give it to him, the t'nai is not going to be effective, and it's going to be a chalitza. And therefore, mimer that he does in the terminology of zikas Yevam and afterwards is not going to take effect because the zika was already removed, even though the stipulation was not fulfilled. And one more interpretation, Rabbi Shloimy, he says, no, the kuliyama yesh t'nai b'chalitza. Everyone holds that there is halacha of stipulation by chalitza. Rashi says, and Tais discusses this too, the Gemara says later on of Kavav and Aleph, that if someone is misled for chalitza, because we want to do chalitza and we mislead him, we tell him a false thing, even so it's going to be kosher. Says Rashi, these Tanaim don't hold to that. and they hold that there is a halacha stipulation in the chalitza that it has to be fulfilled. So then what's the machlekes? Why does Rebbe hold that one way and the Ramban hold it another way? The machlekes is a classic halacha known as, do you have to double the stipulation? And we're talking about, for example, where it was not double. Where Mar Savar, Rebbe held, being in T'nai Kafel, you need to have what's called a double stipulation, which is like the T'nai B'nai Gad B'nai Reuven, when they wanted to go into Eretz Yisrael, and they were telling Moshe Rabbeinu, oh, if we stay over here, we'll get Eber Yarden, and he was saying, oh, okay, and he said both ways. And there's many halachas of stipulation we'll learn out from it. If you do go, and if you don't go, you have to say both ways. Now over here, where it was not doubled, meaning he didn't say, oh, if you give me the money, it'll be chalitza. If you don't give me the money, it's not going to be chalitza. It wasn't double. He only said one way. So that's not considered tonight to nullify the chalitza. So therefore, Rebbe held, okay, so that's not a tonight. You don't have to have a double stipulation. And therefore the stipulation is valid, and therefore the kedushin will be typhus because there's no valid chalitza until the stipulation is fulfilled. Those are 6 different interpretations. In the machlekes, Rebbe ended up on. Thank you to any time for both of us. What? Why don't they hold that you have to have T'nai Kafel? If you learn out, it depends what you learn out from Nega B'nai Reuven. You learn out that you have to have T'nai Kafel. They hold that you don't have to have, that you don't learn that out from Nega B'nai Reuven.
Any we're just here.
I'm trying to remember, I think this is my how much we learn out from the Nega B'nai Reuven. There's many different halachas. Everyone agrees to everything we learn out. Nega B'nai Reuven, you have to have that.
Down already?
And,